Welcome to Stranded in Pittsburgh. Stranded Sports Podcast is no more. We talked about Pittsburgh stuff the majority of the time anyway, so why not finally, after one of us has given up on a career in sports journalism, one of us left the industry and is slowly working back in as a freelancer, and one just graduated and can only probably say problematic things to derail his career, now's the perfect time to try and find a niche audience. That's just business management 101. But welcome again to the first ever episode of Stranded in Pittsburgh. It's the hottest free agent in Pittsburgh media, Ethan Morrison, freshly off of his time at Robert Morris University in just 3 years. It's me, the TV news washout, Nick Hederick, and it's law school student Jack O'Brien, here to guide you through a new era of Pittsburgh sports podcasting. Very excited to have everyone back, and welcome to new listeners as well. Guys, how we doing?
Good. Can't complain.
I mean, all things considered, after reading the I don't know, probably one of the best organizational eulogies I've ever heard out of the Athletic yesterday from Yoey and Rossi about just how much discourse there was and just turmoil in the Penguins front office every single day. But I'm good for a Thursday.
He's looking at the bright side of things.
Yeah. There you go.
So, how's this show going to work? We're going to talk about the Steelers, talk about the Pirates, talk about the Penguins. We'll talk about Pitt, RMU, and Duquesne when something big happens. These two probably followed Pitt closer than I have ever, so I can't really offer much insight into Pitt. As a little Catholic boy, I was a Notre Dame fan, so sorry. I don't know what I wanted to join a conference for football too. Okay, don't get me wrong.
No, you don't.
Okay, I'm glad. I prepared myself for you to be more hostile, and I was already getting defensive. So then when you said don't worry about it, I had to completely reboot.
No, I said no. I said no. You don't. You don't want them to join a conference.
Oh,
you want to have that crutch to lean. You want to have that crutch to lean on the rest of your life. Don't lie to yourself.
How embarrassing. Anyway, speaking of those three colleges in Pittsburgh, the big three, I would say, Jack's through two of them. Jack's through a year at Duquesne Law, undergrad at RMU. Will he go get a doctorate at Pitt? This podcast probably won't go on long enough to find out. But
I'm sick of reading. I don't want to do this shit anymore.
Fair enough. A career in law sounds great if you hate reading. Anyway, the Pittsburgh Steelers. Hell of a week for them. Most of it's just talking heads creating big issues out of things that weren't big issues. But as talking heads, we have to touch on the other talking heads. That's a lot of talking heads. Anyway, regardless from those storylines, they signed Marcus Golden from Arizona, adding some more linebacker depth for Highsmith and TJ Watt. I put it in the rundown as this. If you guys want to giggle, say that's a stupid way to put it, feel free. Is Omar Khan a wizard? Because he's done almost nothing this offseason that I didn't like.
Yeah, I think
actually, Ethan, you go. We'll get a system down.
No, it's all good. Yeah, we'll work things out.
This isn't riding a bike.
Yeah, no, but I think he's done a great job so far as the new GM. He's filled in nicely when Kevin Colbert left to retire at the end of last year, and he was just able to slot in nicely and really. His first draft was incredible. I felt like he made all the right moves. He did what he needed to do and put together a solid, young core and a very, very good draft class his first time around. And, just some of the, like Nick, like you said, there hasn't really been a move that's really been questionable over these past couple of months that he's really been truly running things. But, I would consider him a wizard because, you don't put that lightly. And yes, it's a little bit too early to jump the gun and really say that, yeah, he's, one of the best out there. Yes. But for the time being, he's made the moves and he's made all the right moves that you would want out of a GM. And especially coming into an organization that has a rich history and who has made a lot of, big moves in the past. He's done everything right so far. So there's not much to complain about.
I mean, hopping on the tail end of that, I like how he's been aggressive. Normally when new guys come into a job like this, they kind of play it a little more conservative. You've heard so much about the draft. I know that no one really takes the NFL Network's draft grade as gospel, but this is one of the first times I've seen the Steelers in the A category, which is good to hear. Looking at their last couple of drafts, I think one of the only first rounders that they have had in the last decade is TJ Watt, who's currently playing. You've had a couple other ones, burn out pretty quickly, and then you don't see them anymore.
Where did Devin Bush go, by the way, Jack?
Artie Burns, that guy from Michigan who tore his ACL and then kind of regressed backwards. And
now you
didn't really have a great support system around him. I can't remember his name, but he, up until that point in his career, he looked pretty good. But no, it's good to see. One note I had, though, is Omar Khan has done a great job, but he's missed out on a very large free agent. And we lost him and his patronage, and all of his failed crypto endeavors to dreaded AFC rival and the Raiders. Why isn't Tom Brady in our ownership group is something we're going to have to be asking ourselves for a long time, as we just kind of see the trickle-down economics of Tom Brady's winning ways just infect Mark Davis to his soul. They're going to have the same haircut in like 2 weeks, I can guarantee it. And that's you are not ready. You're not ready for a front office that looks that good, gentlemen. I don't think we've ever seen the likes of it. The Cadillac of a human being that Mark Davis is, with Tom Brady on his side, FTX might come back. We have no idea. There's a lot of potential there. So that's my only minus on Omar Khan. Other than that, I think he's done a great job.
I didn't expect that conversation ending with an FTX reference, but Omar Khan has just added depth, signed Patrick Peterson, signed Allen Robinson. I love the moves he's made. I'm really excited about the receiving core. Calvin Austin should finally debut. George Pickens, Deontay Johnson, Allen Robinson, and then, Pat Freiermuth. Did I say? Yeah, I said George Pickens. But, that's a really exciting wide receiver, tight end room there. And, I don't want to go out and say it's great. It's going to be phenomenal. But I think there's a lot of room for surprises there. It might not be a surprise to Steelers fans, but to teams and fan bases that are kind of overlooking the Steelers receivers room because of how talented the other AFC North receivers rooms are. I think they can really make some headway this year. And I really hope they target George Pickens more. But we'll see. That's a long conversation that we can touch on at another day. Regardless, though, go ahead, Jack.
The one thing I want to add is I'm really excited to see how Allen Robinson does this year, because there's not going to be pressure on him to be a number 1 or 2 guy. Mm-hmm. He'll fit into a guy who'll come in and play a couple of downs. And he's talented. He's old. He's had some hamstring issues, but I think with a limited role, that won't be a factor. And I do think adding him on is it's just another sidearm that the Steelers can throw on the field at any point in time if anyone needs a break, or if they even want to put him in a slot position. I think that's going to work out really well, as him and Pickett kind of get some more time to know each other at the end of training camp. I like the Allen Robinson thing a lot.
It's almost like a prove it deal in a way. Can he still go? Matt Stafford had a vendetta against him last year where he never threw him the ball. My buddy Kyle, who took him in fantasy, was screaming obscenities at Stafford all season long.
Yuck.
But look, the Steelers needed maturity in their, receivers room, and they signed Allen Robinson. The Pirates needed maturity in their pitching rotation bullpen, and they got Rich Hill.
Stealing Dick.
That's exciting. It's exciting. TJ Watt missed the first day of OTAs. We don't need to spend too much time on this. He showed up for day 2, but on day 1, Pittsburgh media, who said this team can't win without TJ Watt, suddenly wanted TJ Watt to, be accused of war crimes for skipping the first day of OTAs a year after he spent the majority of the time on the sidelines with an injury and then played through an injury. I don't care. They paid the guy. He's obviously a hard worker, wears his heart on his sleeve. Again, played through injury for a good portion of the games last year. He clearly will go out and help this team, regardless if he is 100%. Him missing the first day of OTAs means nothing to me. I don't know what you could add to that, but Jack, we ended on FTX last subject, so why don't we let Ethan start taking us down a similar thought process I had, and then you can hit the Uno reverse card whenever we get back to you.
Yeah, no, I I don't know why everyone's making such a big deal about this. I mean, they've made, a big deal about, everything else that has gone on during OTAs this week. And it's not that big of a deal. He doesn't show up. It's an optional workout. It's not mandatory. You don't need to be there. He was injured all of last year, Nick, like you said, so he doesn't need to be there. There's no reason why, we're making this much big of a deal out of Watt not being at an optional workout day on day one. It doesn't matter that much. Yeah. Does it look kind of bad? In a way, yeah, it does. Like, if you're a veteran on this team and you're supposed to be a leader on this team, a captain, yeah. But in the grand scheme of things, will this mean much come August, come September? Absolutely not. It's not that big of a deal. Life moves on. He showed up for day 2. It's all is well, and it's not going to be that big of an issue.
Yeah, this is the biggest not. This is just what happens when you're at this point in NFL beat writing. That's the only thing that happened that day, other than the fact that the Steelers held the first day of OTAs. So you put a paragraph in about it, and if some people need to hit a word count, they start asking questions at the end of that paragraph. This is absolutely nothing. It's just ridiculous that it was even a story. It's a throwaway line at the end of a paragraph. You showed up the next day. I missed work on Monday. Nothing happened. I showed
Life
up.
Moved on. Are you saying that you have the same impact on your day-to-day operations at work as TJ Watt?
You can make the argument.
Fair enough.
From a certain point of view.
It's good to have self-worth.
And 2 other vague sentences on answering that.
On footballing with Ben Roethlisberger and his friend.
I hate the name of that. I hate that name so much. That is the dumbest podcast name I've ever heard.
Sorry, Ben. Ben basically
that's what he came up with. He had time to think about that. He had a marketing team. I can guarantee you. Shit, run it by your kids. I can't get over that name. And I'm not saying I am saying I could have found a better one. It's just
once again, this is the Stranded in Pittsburgh podcast,
and it's somewhat better.
Anyway, Ben basically told Kenny Pickett, "I wasn't necessarily rooting for you to fail, but I didn't want." This is not verbatim; it's the gist. Basically said, "I didn't want you to fail, but I also didn't want you to do so well." Where people are like, "Oh, who's Ben? Ben who?" Which is crazy for a guy who won you 2 Super Bowls, took you to 3 to say. But I think this was a pretty big non-story too. Kenny Pickett really didn't seem offended by it. He basically confirmed that when they interviewed him at the end of OTAs the one day. And frankly, I kind of get where Ben's coming from. When I left my first real job, obviously you go, man, I wonder if the replacement's going to show up and be so much better than me, and it's actually a blessing in disguise for them, or if I actually kind of made an impact here. I don't think necessarily there's ill intent behind it. I just kind of think that's how a lot of people would process that situation. And unfortunately for Ben, that's all someone kind of needs to grab onto something and run with it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a classic Ben statement. Like, he's made statements like that before. He said that he feels like he still wanted to play when he retired and when the Steelers pushed him out of the organization and pretty much forced him to retire at the end of last year. It's a classic Ben statement. I feel like there wasn't really much to look into there. I mean, it's like you said, it's not really much of something that needs to be looked in more into than it already is. It's just, one of those statements like, oh yeah, like, I don't want him to succeed. Like, nobody wants, their successor to, have a bigger name than the previous guy. And especially with how much weight Ben held within that organization, within the Steelers organization, I can see where he's coming from within the sentiment. And, you have to have a lot of balls to say that in front of somebody's face. So, I mean, I'll give him props for that, to just say that to Kenny's face on Ben's podcast, just to say that sentiment to him. And
imagine going on a podcast called Football and a guy tells you
right,
he
exactly.
doesn't want you to do well.
Right, exactly. But it's just like, all right, let's just move on. Like, there's no hard feelings between the two. It seems like both of them are are cool with one another. It's not like the Big Ben, Mason Rudolph situation that's been going on and all of that stuff when Ben was still with the Steelers. So it seems like they're both on the same page and both all is well there. But I mean, it's a classic Ben statement. I didn't expect anything else. I mean, if you know Ben and you've watched him throughout the course of his career and how he talked on different shows and how he carried himself, it should come to no surprise.
This is just him staying in the Steelers news cycle. That's just kind of what I took it as. He's done this a couple times. Whenever he said, I feel like I could come back at any point in time. He said that when the Steelers started to kind of like lose some games and that you could see that it wasn't your average, 9-10 win Steeler team that was pretty guaranteed up until that point. And again, it's like, do I really think that he thought in his head that he could come back and play about 12 more games of NFL football when I watched him play around 16 and he was having a hard time just moving? This has just been just trying to stay relevant with the team. I know that he has a heightened role where he's somewhat of a consultant to them. Now, Ethan, you made mention to the weight that he had to carry around the team. You also have to take into account the welt he had to carry above his belt. Because Ben was a heavier guy from time to time. I'm not going to let that slide by. An athlete nonetheless, a famous Pittsburgh fathlete up there with Phil Kessel. Now, the other thing is, going out and saying it to Pickett is I get that you don't want the new guy to be better than you, and no one thought he was going to be. But obviously when you're like, oh, Ben who? We're fine with Kenny. Obviously that's a joke, and it's just I feel like Ben's ego can still be hurt from time to time, and this was pretty decent evidence of it. I think he just wants to guys, don't forget, I'm still kind of the Steelers quarterback, right? Even though I don't play anymore.
I think
it's fine.
Maybe because Cowher was on the episode before that, and that did huge numbers. He wanted to guarantee there'd be big numbers for the Kenny Pickett episode.
Hey, he's got the guy gets analytics, all right? Ben knows, he knows pod, all right? Now, I don't know as far as marketing goes, but he knows how to pod. We'll give him that.
Wow. I don't even know how to transition to the Pirates at this stage.
Feeling dick. That's how.
Wow.
Can we talk about how Rich Hill is kind of an animal and he can't hit 92?
That 68-mile-an-hour curve thing he throws is a thing of beauty.
It's
disgusting
pitch I've ever seen.
It's disgusting, though.
It looks like
you can't tell me it's not disgusting.
This is the most stereotypical three dudes
in the zone.
It's the most stereotypical three guys that never played high-level sports thing ever. But I feel like I could get a good swing on that 68-mile-an-hour curve. I don't even want to call it a curveball. It's like a blooping.
It's a sweeper.
Almost like an ethos.
It looks like I like to think I could get wood on one of them. Probably not. I know I couldn't. But it's one of those things where it's you watching how is a major league player not smoking that into the atmosphere of Neptune or something
I don't know why these guys aren't just sitting on every single Rich Hill pitch and just launching it into orbit, because it's they're well, this is going to be the pitch where he goes above 90. I can feel it. And it never comes. It hasn't come for 2 months. It's not going to happen. And he's still 9 strikeouts in his last outing. Now the bats weren't there, and that's not Dick Mountain's fault. It's just the fact that this dude is giving you quality start after quality start, and people are like, oh man, I'm scared of Rich Hill. I'm not going to lie. I went to the Reds game back when they were winning the World Series, and it was the 2-1 game where Rich Hill came out, and I was scared to death every single time the ball left his hand because I didn't know what was going to happen. Now I know exactly what's going to happen. He's going to throw this crazy wiffle ball pitch, and no one's going to hit it.
Yeah, I mean, he's just been incredible for his age. He's 43 years old. He has, I think, still an under 4 ERA. in the upper threes, but he's just the consistency out of him, and it's what you need, especially with how much the rotation has struggled over the past couple of weeks. Just the consistency that he's been able to bring. Yeah, if his outing's been perfect, no, of course not, but he's been able to put in, some good outings and stack together some, pretty reasonable starts to where it's like, he's still got it. He still has, the ability to go out there every 5 days and put together, a pretty decent outing of, 5 innings or more. And it's just mesmerizing just to see how much he still has in the tank and how much he has left, because he's been doing this for how many years. And a lot of people had a lot of concerns. Yeah. Pretty much for the most part, but it's just like, for a guy, especially with how much, questions coming into this Pirates actually signing this guy, for the amount of, questions and concerns that everyone had about Rich Hill and how he was, how his age was getting up there. He's proven that, he still has it, and he still has the, ability to go out there for 5 days and really, help this team get in a good position to win some ball games.
Pirates are now 25-24. They go on a West Coast
bad.
starting tomorrow or today, depending on when you listen to this, against Seattle. Then they go to San Francisco. Both those teams have similar records. I think the Mariners actually have the same record as the Pirates. They just lost 4 or 6 at home to the Rangers and Diamondbacks. Tough games, but felt like they could have won probably 2 more of those from that swing. It's unfortunate. It's crazy how the pendulum has swiftly changed, because people in this town are so damn hungry for the Pirates to be good. It's sickening to see how much they grasped onto this team, who we knew was still a year away. And we knew with that rotation they were never going to be world beaters. And we knew McCutchen and all of them weren't going to be as hot as they were for a long term. But it's so much fun. It was so much fun the month of April. And you wanted to believe that it was going to happen. As Jack has said since we started this podcast, it felt like 79. You just want anything that feels like 79, 20 years before we were born. And it felt like that. And it was fun because people were kind of saying, no, they're legit. And it wasn't just Pittsburgh people. It was national people. And then it's all just slowly crumbled. And the only saving grace is that their division stinks this year. So let's see what happens, I guess. Let's see what happens.
They're a bad team.
Mm-hmm.
They're a bad team. They've been a bad team.
Yeah. I mean, there's not much more to say. I mean, that first month was insane, and nobody really even thought that they were going to be able to hold that up. But just to see, they're collapsing. There's still a game above 500. I don't think I've ever been this much disinterested from a team that's of a Pirates team that's 1 game over 500 in the month of May than I am right now, because it's just been ugly to watch these past couple of weeks, and just their downfall of what it's been. They're still a year away, and everyone knew that coming into it, and nothing's really changed from that. And maybe hopefully they can turn around and start, stringing together some wins here and there to, keep the confidence up a little bit and keep the fans into it for a little while longer. But no, they're still a year away.
And kind of to touch on what you said, if you would have told me in like February Pirates would be a game above 500 in May, I would have asked you what time machine you hopped out of. Or what possibly could give you the inclination that would happen. I would have been so overjoyed. But the way it has happened, for them to only be a game over 500 right now is just devastating. And like you said, it's hard to even care about them right now. Watching them is quickly basically become a chore again.
Mm-hmm.
They did it because they won 20 games in April, and they've won about 3 in May. And no one else won games, but they won 20 in April, which is it's so dumb. It's bad team. Bottom line, bad team.
Jack's going to die on the bad team hill, not the rich hill. Pittsburgh Penguins, Kyle Dubas as the next GM isn't an imminent move in the last ever Stranded Sports podcast before we rebranded to Stranded in Pittsburgh. Jack said if the Leafs get bounced early, that's the Penguins guy. Well, now there's some chatter that might be the case. Jack, I've seen you rocking back and forth. You're ready to go. You're ready to go. You're ready to rip out of the chains like in Black Ops when you're in that chair and you have to look around. And if you mash the triggers fast enough, you can break out of them. You look like that guy. That's a very niche reference. But Jack, go ahead.
Well, it's leather straps because chains would have been tortured, and the CIA does not do torture, Nick. Or I don't know where you heard that. The Penguins were actually about to name a candidate, and then the Leafs probably just played 5 of the worst games. And I don't even care about the game they won. No heart, just disengaged, which is a word I've been using a lot these playoffs, but it's a way to describe these teams with absolutely no juice. That's how Toronto played against Florida. Now, Florida seems to be a pretty suffocating team, but Carolina looked like they played a little better of a game in this previous series. Florida's going to the Cup, though. I mean, good for them. Let's just touch back on the reasons the Panthers are in the playoffs are because the Penguins lost their last 2 games of the regular season to the 2 worst teams. And during that time, you had the old guard in, and they knew exactly what was going to happen if they lose those 2 games. And due to this article that I just kind of read, they knew. They packed their stuff up before they even flew to Columbus. They knew what was happening. They got fired on the plane. It should be like the chartered flight that got back to Pittsburgh that night that they lost in overtime in the last game of the season. Only game that Crosby, Malkin, and Letang have ever played in their career without playoff implications. So Dubas is going to be the guy. They completely stopped their search as soon as Dubas became available, and they put a hold on that. They made sure they got permission to talk to him, and he's probably going to be announced. I thought it was going to be today. They might do it on Friday or even Saturday, but I honestly think that announcement's coming imminently. I love Dubas as the candidate. What he's been able to build around with that core 4 in Toronto, he's always been able to put a solid bottom 6 together. He knows how to go out and get solid or at least consistent goaltending. He can address needs. And the one thing that I think is going to work really well with FSG is because one of the reasons that Dubas got bounced from Toronto is because the way that he had to go about making moves was it was him, then Shanahan, president of hockey ops, then the ownership group, MLSC. Then MLSC would send it back through Shanahan, back to Dubas. Dubas wanted to streamline the process. FSG is pretty hands-off when it comes to hockey because they don't know it that well. This is their 3rd year owning the team, I think, 2nd, 3rd year owning the team. They're not that comfortable with how these organizations are run. Kyle Dubas is. He just ran the Leafs essentially out of his back pocket for the last 9 years, but he had some hoops to jump through. There's less hoops to jump through here because he'll be communicating directly to management, or they can hire him as president of hockey ops and even see how that goes. But I like him better in a GM role. I think it's going to be him. He's the best candidate right now for what the Penguins need. People said, oh, why would he go to the Ottawa job and not Pittsburgh? And if you told me that I can go to the up-and-up Ottawa Senators who are going to be sold and bought in the next 2 weeks, or I have 4 to 5 years left, good years left of Sidney Crosby, I'm taking the 4 to 5 years of Sidney Crosby, and I'm going to try to win a Stanley Cup. So expect that to happen within the next 5 days.
What do we think the odds of that happening the second this podcast gets uploaded are?
It could, but it's close to 9, and I don't know how late FSG works. But I don't know because I don't know what time it is in England. Actually, they're ahead of us. Because they own Liverpool.
Oh, okay. I was a little confused there. I thought you were implying Boston was ahead of Pittsburgh in terms of time.
No, only a couple minutes, actually.
Thank you.
I just know the sun sets a little earlier in Boston.
And an article was released from Rob Rossi and Josh Yohe of The Athletic. Highly encourage any Penguin fan check that one out, detailing Hextall and the end of that regime and all of the behind-the-scenes stories that I don't think have really seen the light of day yet. Jack, you're our Penguins expert. What are you grabbing onto here and kind of focusing on from that piece?
There are 3 takeaways I go out from this. There's a lot to go into, and I'd rather just direct people to read it because it's much more detailed than the synopsis I'm going to give you. But there were 3 points that really stuck out to me. The first one being that when Burke and Hextall were hired, FSG was, or at least Morehouse at the time, they were looking for, because FSG was pretty hands off, as I just said, with the whole why Dubas works. And again, it was a new thing for them, so they weren't as comfortable being present in the hiring process for that. They didn't really know what they were looking for. The people running the interviews, one of the big things why Burke and Hextall got hired, because they were looking for candidates who were willing, not only willing, but enthusiastically looking forward to, as Hextall was noted to be, breaking up the big three in Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. Hextall's preseason plan for this last season was a year with Crosby, but no Malkin and Letang. And who did Hextall think could slide into the number 2 center spot? I'll give you a hint. He's old.
Oh, no.
It was supposed to be Jeff Carter sliding into the 2 center spot. That was his plan, to let Malkin walk. And he was really shitty with Malkin in negotiations. There was a whole part on that. Mm-hmm. And just the way that Hextall and Burke kind of had this closed inner circle between those two. Chris Pryor, the assistant GM, they would sit and watch every practice from the office in Cranberry with the blinds drawn. I mean, and this is actually a line in the article, some of the most disastrous and the worst decisions of the last 2.5 years were made in that office behind those blinds, which is a great visualization of how Burke and Hextall ran this team. They were at odds with Sullivan the entire time. They were at odds with players the entire time. Sullivan was asking Hextall for Jacob Chikrin in November. He wanted a defensive upgrade immediately because he saw the Penguins' D4 wasn't as strong. Also, Ruda couldn't play because of cap mismanagement. Alex Nylander had to bounce back and forth the entire season because of cap mismanagement. Hextall miscalculated the cap, and that was something that was known the entire year. But that was the first point, the fact that they came in with a plan to break up the big three, and then FSG said, "You're high if you think we want you to do that." They gave him a directive to re-sign Malkin and Letang as soon as they lost in Game 7 of the Rangers. The other 2 points were the fact, well, the other one, it was that, and it was also Jeff Carter sliding in the second center spot, which, can you imagine what the first 4 months of the season would have been like had Evgeny Malkin not been the second center? If Jeff Carter had to play almost 25 minutes a game, almost 20 minutes a game, even at that. So then there's that. Then it starts to come unraveled towards the end to where Hextall was like, then there's the whole story where people kind of know it, but like FSG asks Morehouse, "What's your plan on the business side?" And they ask Hextall, "What's your plan on the hockey side?" Morehouse has a PowerPoint talking about team finance, lost revenue, and ticket projections. They get to Hextall and he's completely off guard. He's like, "It's in my head. I can't put it on paper. It's in my head." And they're like, "Well, put it on paper." So he spent the next 2 hours scrambling, put it in a Word document, and printed it in the hotel, work office space. He didn't have a plan. He just thought he would waltz into another job where he could just take up space, which is exactly what him and Burke did for the last 2 years. I mean, they wanted to bring in Miller at the deadline. JT Miller's contract is enormous. And he also didn't produce all this year, but you can't take that cap hit on when you already have mismanaged the cap, and you can't bring guys on because of the cap. You're going to be over, and you're not utilizing how you circumvent the cap with long-term IR like other teams whose management isn't asleep 16 hours a day does. Look at Vegas. They're about $20 million over the cap right now as we speak, about to sweep the Dallas Stars tonight. That's a team whose front office cares about winning at any cost, even if it's a little bit of repercussions from the league. Hextall and Burke were so hands-off it was ridiculous, and they did not talk to the lower levels of the organization past Chris Pryor. So they had their own way of doing things. And then you have Dad's trip being scheduled on the trade deadline weekend. It was the dumbest thing in the world. And he was putting guys on waivers before the games, not after the games. And they were at dinner in Tampa. and Teddy Bluger and his dad were there. And it was something that Crosby had organized at a steakhouse in Tampa. And he found out through social media during the dinner that he got traded. Him and his dad got up and left. And Crosby ran out and consoled him. And then he sat back down. And the only thing he said was, "That's just not how we do things in Pittsburgh." And then he barely said anything the rest of there. And that's where it's so evident. That comes a little later in the article. That's where it's so evident that this management group did not care about the player personnel, the coaching staff, the fans, the vision for the organization, or the vision that the ownership group had. This was probably the most disastrous front office I've seen in my 10 years as a Penguins fan. It's just to read this, every line, you get a little more angrier than the last. And that's how I felt reading this entire thing. Again, I encourage everyone to go read the article on The Athletic. I'm pretty sure the title is called "Fear, Loathing, and Chaos: the Unraveling of the Pittsburgh Penguins." It's from the title alone, you're in for a really rough ride, and it makes you so angry that Hextall even had a job for as long as he did. And it's this burnout season that sent Florida to the Cup. Florida played, but they sent the Panthers to the Cup.
I heard of the Bluger story. That was one of the stories I heard before I really read the article, and
it's disgusting.
It just sucks. Obviously, his reaction, I think, was more than justified. I know sports and transactions like that, it's kind of cutthroat. It's just part of the business. But for it to happen during the dad's trip that way, had to have stung a little extra. And probably, as you alluded to, the dad's trip shouldn't have been right at the deadline. I get they were, I think, in Florida at that time. And so that was probably a no-brainer. Hey, let's have all our dads come while we're in a Florida swing. It just makes sense. Someone should have said, "Hey, that's the deadline. So we might be trading someone then, and we don't want it to be really awkward." Let alone Teddy Bluger, who, wasn't a world beater, but I think Teddy Bluger did his role pretty damn well, and he was pretty well liked. So to hear that his final thoughts of his time as a Penguin are so negative, I think is going to be upsetting to pretty much anyone who reads that.
I mean, the Brock McGinn thing too. Everyone in the locker room really liked Brock McGinn. And I know that you freed up space and you freed up that money thinking you were going to get Chikrin. And you got Mikael Granlund instead. A move that nobody liked. Besides Hextall and Burke, who defended it vehemently in the subsequent days after the trade deadline and press conferences. So they did not care. They just didn't care. And they wanted to break this team up and rebuild so bad. And as soon as they found out that they weren't, they were like, "All right, fine. I don't have to do any part of my job. I just have to show up." So it was rough. It was bad. Great read though, but I'm still a little angry about just how the season went.
The Panthers love that regime. If I see one more tweet saying that could have been Pittsburgh, I'm going to jump off.
It wouldn't have been. That's the thing. It's just Florida was hungry. They're a way better defensive.
You can thank the Penguins, but you can't say it should have been the Pens. You watched two games, you would have known that wouldn't have been the Pens.
Well, I saw someone post the box score, and I was at that Chicago game, by the way. I got out of class and literally walked across the street, went to that game, and my buddy described it as a 2-hour open casket funeral. It was horrible.
I hope class wasn't too difficult that day, because that's a really crappy day.
Oh,
school doesn't go well, and then you go watch that.
Someone posted the box score and said someone should arrest the Penguins for this.
That's
Peter Mrazek, just best game of his life. So good.
Any parting thoughts on the Penguins there, fellas? Sorry, I thought I was about to sneeze, but
I'm very excited for what's to come. I think Dubas is a great fit. I'm excited to see what Dubas is able to bring with an active role in this front office. I'm excited to see what he does in the draft. They're not in a great position, but it's still a position where you can get a solid pick. And the NHL draft is pretty deep, so you can find some gems in the late rounds. Philip Gustafsson was one of those second, third round picks that the Penguins had, and he started for Minnesota in the playoffs this year. So you can find a lot of good guys. Dubas will be able to find them. like I said, Dubas' management style fits right in with what FSG wants, and I also think Dubas is just a good hockey mind, a good business hockey mind. So he's a good team builder. I think he's perfect for what this team's looking for right now. I'm just excited. It's weird because like this was the worst I've felt watching the Penguins ever, and it's also like exactly what needed to happen.
Next week could be a movie. We say that all the time on this show that it's our first episode of. Next week could be a movie with Dubas in here. But think things could be looking up for the Penguins, as Jack explained there. So that's going to do it. Psych, you thought. You really thought I would launch a new podcast and not have an engaging challenge for my co-hosts. If you thought that, you were wrong. Because, gentlemen, we've played Who Are You People, our great game where we go back and try to guess random 2000s athletes. But now that it's a Pittsburgh-only show, we had to change the name of the segment, where we go back and find random 2000s Pittsburgh athletes to enjoy. So, gentlemen,
the title's going to be.
Buckle up as we prepare for the first installment of the Rod Barajas of the week.
I thought that was going to be a way worse title name, and it wasn't. That's great.
Yeah. Jack thought I was going to cop out and be like, "Who are yins?"
I thought it was so bad. I was just ready to leave the meeting immediately, but that's so much better.
Rod Barajas of the week. The social team is cooking up graphics as we speak. It's me. I'm the social team. Gentlemen, this one's really easy in my opinion. Should be an easy point on the board for both of you. But here we go. This man played for the Pirates from 2012 to 2018. Was a middle infielder, hit .256 on the Pirates, played for a couple teams, but ultimately his career ended in 2021 with the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, I got it.
So I'm not sure the best way to do this without one of you cheating from the other's answer. So I'll just count down.
I'll be true and stick with mine because I'm probably going to be wrong majority of the time.
I think I'm pretty confident in mine. So
let me think about
really
mine.
Just have
for
like a notepad near you two, and then you turn it around and show me on the 3 or something.
Let me see if I got.
We will not be using video from this week's episode, but in the future we may be doing this as a video podcast.
Oh, wait! I think I have it, but I know my first guess was going to be.
I'll write it down.
Okay. Ethan, write yours down. I don't have paper around me, but I'm going to say mine.
All right. We'll wait for Ethan to be done. Is yours written?
I'm good. Yeah.
All right. Jack, what is your guess?
Josh Harrison.
Ethan, what is your guess?
Jordy Mercer.
One of you's right. And it's the one who wrote it down. That was Jordy Mercer. Is the inaugural Rod Barajas of the week.
You don't know my first guess was?
I hope it wasn't Clint Barmas.
It's Jung Ho Gong.
Jung Ho Gong. I don't
think too many legal issues. I think
I don't
play until 2021.
I don't even think he came back after that.
I don't think he did either.
I think it was done after 16.
I could be completely wrong, but wasn't he like not allowed in the U.S. for a while?
I don't know.
Abuse overseas. Yeah, and he had a few DUIs or something too. I think allegedly.
Right.
I don't know if any of that was ever proven.
In Korea,
that's allegedly.
In Korea, yeah.
There was a video of the one, and he crushed a divider.
Like Antonio Brown going like 90 down McKnight Road.
Still one of the most impressive driving feats Pittsburgh's ever seen.
I've said it before. I've never seen McRoad. That's the new McDonald's Happy Meal name. I've never seen McKnight Road dead enough to where you could pick up the speed to go 90. Yeah. So that was a feat. That was a feat by Antonio Brown. Any final thoughts before we depart here? I don't have any more games planned. Maybe next time, but for now, Ethan's up 1-0 on the Rod Barajas of the week. If that doesn't get you to tune in next week, I can't help you.
Well, my parting words are 3 words that all start with D. Dylan, Dick, and Dubas.
Wow.
3Ds. We're going in next week.
3D. The best Mighty
3D.
Duck movie. Thank you for joining us.
Stranded in Pittsburgh 3D.
Stranded in Pittsburgh.
Rich Hill.
Playing in 3D and IMAX near you. We'll see you next week.